Welcome back to AgriLAC. For your information, all panels will be recorded and available on IDB Invest's YouTube channel. We've already heard about ag tech and how it enhances productivity and the importance of closing social gaps in supply chains. Now we'll discuss the impact of traceability on agricultural supply chains and a concept of value-added commodities. So with end-to-end technology-enabled traceability, we can now have continuity across the value chain from the first mile through production, through transformations to the final consumer. By connecting these segregated operations, for the first time, consumers can know what they're getting from producers and what is actually in their products. This opens potential for value-added commodities, what would seem a contradiction in terms. I'm your moderator, Joe Selwood with Revere, a Brazil-based consultancy focused on turning business into a driver of global sustainability. Our panelists today to discuss this topic will be Daniela Mariuso, Executive Director and LATAM Landscapes Program Director at IDH, the Sustainable Trade Initiative. Leonel Alameda, Sustainability Manager at Marfrig, and Jason Berryhill, co-founder of Whole Chain. I ask each of the panelists to start with a brief description of your organization so everybody knows where you're coming from, and also remind you that for opening comments, we have 5 minutes so we can treat some questions. I'd like to start with Daniela because when I think about this concept about value-added commodities, I very much think about IDH and the work that you're doing there. And to open, please just describe IDH and what your understanding definition of value-added commodities are and how you're putting that into practice with a landscape approach. Daniela?
Hello, thank you, Joe. First of all, I would like to thank IDB Invest for the invitation and opportunity to be here today. And I hope all of you are fine and safe. So IDH are the acronym to Initiative for Sustainable Trade. That is a Dutch-based foundation that operates with the public and private resources with the main mission to support the companies and farmers and civil society and governments to achieve the sustainable development targets of the UN. And we are working for 12 years in different supply chains around the world. And our main impacts that we are delivering are better incomes, better jobs, and better environments. So all our activities globally are connected to more sustainable trade and to deliver impacts in these 3 levels. And I'm based in Brazil and working very close to production sites. So there is a work we are doing in Mato Grosso state. That's number 5 producer of soy and beef in the world in tons. And what we can see regarding the added value, I'm working for 20 years now on traceability and sustainability criteria for foods. And what we see is that there is a huge transition from the power of the consumers because until 15 years ago, everything that we were designing and funded were related to European final consumers. And what we see from 10 years up to now is that there is a huge transition to the power of demand of the Asian and other markets that are more connected south to south. So basically our strategy of IDH is that it's okay if we produce very much sustainable commodities to go to Europe, but this will not solve the problems in the producing countries if you don't have this vision of how can we generate impact at scale and how can we address and create awareness in the local consumptions and consumers so they start to see added value in these responsible products. And so this is I believe the largest challenge for everyone, the supply chains, specifically on beef, because we are working with a very strict profits in the whole supply chain of beef production. And in some moments, it will be important to have this product in a fair price in the local market. So to sell products that have sustainability in their core in a more expensive way. This was for us a past trend. There is still a niche for this, but if you really want to generate this impact at scale and transform the way the land is being used in the producing countries, we need to go where the commodities are going. So basically for soy and beef, this means Brazil and also China and other countries in Asia. And so this will be a challenge for everyone because in those countries, population has not enough money to pay for a premium for their own products. So that will be, I think, the challenge for those supply chains in the coming years. And regarding traceability, we see that it's becoming more and more important because of the pandemic. So everyone, even the ones that are not so educated or worried about the origin of the foods now is really getting more aware of, yes, what I'm eating, is this safe, where is this being produced? So there is an increase in the population that is looking for more information about the foods. And so this is a trend. And what we see is that all the technology, basically comparing to 10 years ago, now we have a lot of solutions. But then the difficulties will be in the negotiations and in the political side, because transparency means a lot in several angles. So transparency is there. We have solutions for it, but we need to understand how we'll make this possible in the several supply chains that we work. And finally, what we developed with the landscapes approach is something that we believe is important to generate impact at scale is governance. So for attracting investments and funds and private and public investments, we need to show for the investors that a given region is able to manage the use of the land in a more sustainable way, and with the public commitments and indicators. So this is basically what we built in Mato Grosso state, and working there with the Carrefour that was also presented here yesterday to produce the program that's called Sustainable Production of Calves that we can share more about later. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Daniel, for that context. I'd like to go to Lionel now to get a little view of what this can mean for a business like Marfrig. Also, Lionel, tell everybody a little bit about Marfrig, who you are, and what's the business case? How has this concept of, say, deforestation-free beef had practical impacts on your business? Lionel? Lionel, I think you're on mute, still on mute.
Apologize again.
There you go.
The benefits of the technologies when we are not so used to do it. So thank you so much, Joe, for this invitation. I would to thank BID to this and this very interesting opportunity to share something that we are putting on practice, and to share with you all of this, mainly about the traceability and about the importance of this in the beef sector and main in our chain. About Marfrig, Marfrig is the second biggest beef processor company worldwide, with a consolidated slaughtering capacity over 31,000 heads a day. It is the biggest hamburger producer in the world, with more than 220,000 tons a year. Marfrig today employs more than 30,000 1,000 employees distributed across 32 units. We process and sell fresh beef, processed products, as well leather, supplying several countries holding different brands, and not forgetting to include the sustainability as a priority in the whole process, always with full transparency. Using what Daniela Marius said a little bit before, transparency is a very important part of the traceability because they work together, and one is not possible without the other one. Based on that, and try to answer in the question on how to add value to the commodities and the benefits of free deforestation in the beef supply chain. More and more, we are talking not about adding value, but according to the current demands in the world, we understand that we will only have space in the market for commodities that reconcile production with preservation. It is exactly what happens in our business and is the path that Marfrig has been following for the last decade, and which was expanded with the launch last year of the Marfrig Verde Mais program. So we are every time trying to combine preservation with production. And just to give you one more example, if we were talking about ESG 3 years ago, we would have a different scenario that we have today. The term itself is very present in any discussion regarding sustainability today, as well issues about each of the items. So if we are talking about environmental, about social, or about governance, they are very present in the discussion today in these different aspects. We see more and more entities making commitments tied to ESG criteria. So again, some sustainability criteria as deforestation is very present today. They are part of the business, of the current business today. Is not in terms of add value, but is the real thing today. So this really shows us this is a trend that bringing to the cattle production chain, which is our main business, the theme of deforestation is central. Today, the discussion is about whether deforestation criteria will be, if it's illegal or zero deforestation. But it's not more discussion about has or not deforestation into the sustainability criteria. This criteria is present. In terms of the business, we see several markets such as Europe, to which we can only export. That is, we have this profile. We have all of the information about the environmental perspective, if everything is okay. If we are using forest or not, if the forest is deforested or not in our supply chain. Using the sample, using the example about the preservation in the forest, since 2009, we already have monitored area in more that today is more than 300 million hectares. It is traceability in practice, because with it is possible to have the possibility to demonstrate all this information. This is transparency, and this is traceability that we can know and we can demonstrate the pathway about where these beef are coming from and what is the path that they pass through. And summarizing, to observe the supply chain, some sustainability criteria as deforestation is the rule. It is the standard for maintenance within the market in the coming years, and not add value for the commodities. So we finish here with this message. Deforestation or criteria about the deforestation sustainability is the standard. Is not something as add value, but is the mainstream that we are living today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lino. Now I'd like to pass the word to our last panelist, Jason, our in-house tech guru from Whole Chain. Jason, please tell everybody a little bit about Whole Chain. And also, what has changed in technology applications over the last 10 years? What can we do today that wasn't possible, 10 years ago? What is event-based traceability, and how does this happen in practice? Just a practical example with producers, that'd be great. Jason?
Great. Yeah. Thank you, Joe. And thank you, IDB Invest, for having me on this panel. I really appreciate being included. This is a very important topic that we're getting into. So at Whole Chain, we enable trust, coordination, and transparency in fragmented supply chains using our blockchain-based traceability tool, which is our Whole Chain application. As Joe mentioned, we use event-based traceability, which a lot of times when talking about traceability, there's a bit of a misnomer. It's not just a chain of custody, but with event-based traceability, you're looking at the chain of events that come to make up a final finished good or product. So that includes the various transformations and other events that occur. Earlier was mentioned, leather and beef. A good example of that, it starts with cattle, it then moves to raw leather hides. That's a transformation, and then a transformation into those being tanned, and then ultimately into finished goods. Without each of those events along the way, if you just had a chain of custody, you can't trace a cow into a shoe, right? And so you have to have those various events that occur, and this is aligned with GS1 standards, which are used in food, pharma, and other areas. So we enable that along the supply chain and the recording of those events. In terms of, and we work across really food and agriculture supply chains. In terms of what has changed in the kind of overall environment to enable this to happen, I would say there's 5 major things. One is greater connectivity. In the past, 10 years and even continuing, there's greater connectivity, mobile proliferation in producing markets. You've got a number of other areas where we've created greater, internet connectivity for things like sensors, as well as for manual inputs of data. So that's now possible in a way that it wasn't before. Another is increased digital awareness. 10 years ago, it wasn't as commonplace to have someone on a farm using an app regularly in their daily life. Now it is extremely commonplace, and so it's very familiar. So to use that app for business, it's already being done actually in many cases on consumer applications. Facebook or WhatsApp might be being used to communicate information, but it's very unstructured and it's not very useful. And so, but at least it's familiar now, so we can bring those tools to those areas. Consumer expectations and awareness. I would say that's the third thing. Daniela had touched on that, but I think more than ever, consumers are expecting and demanding brands to be transparent about the sources of the products that they're consuming. And so, and they're also more and more aware of those brands that are and are not transparent about those sources, and they're making decisions accordingly. Another one is regulatory requirements. So again, a good example of this is the FDA and their Food Safety Modernization Act. If you just Google Rule 204 traceability list, you can see as an example some of the upcoming regulation around the requirements for traceability around particular commodities, and that's going to grow. And we're seeing the same thing in European and Asian markets and around the world, where regulatory bodies are enforcing traceability back to the farm or boat. And that has to do with compliance around things like food safety, but also social compliance and ensuring that those in the supply chain are fairly treated. And then finally, and this is a newer one, is investor concern around ESGs. In the past, ESG claims were seen very much as a marketing function, and they were made, I would say, in some cases, very without as much substantiation that should have been there. And I think more and more investors are requiring the brands that they're a part of to substantiate their claims, and that means traceability, because you can't really substantiate something if you don't know where it comes from. So that's a really big area, and Lionel had actually touched on that as well. I would say, and this was also mentioned, COVID has exacerbated all of these 5 effects. This has been something that it was already heading this direction for each of these areas, but COVID has made it very much a concern in every front. We see this across many different commodities. I mentioned earlier with leather and beef, but an example that we do a lot of is seafood, because that's on the traceability list for the FDA. We're doing this with large and small brands across the seafood industry as well as other industries. And in terms of specific examples, Joe, that you had mentioned, we can really see different brands that we're working with. They've gone from commitments around traceability to implementation around traceability, all the way back to the farmer boat. And so, all different size brands are now getting into this. So,
thank you, Jason. That's great context from everyone. Good to hear from Daniela that this is broken out from just niche markets. We're really talking about all markets now. Lionel kind of reinforcing that this is core to the business. It's something, the issue in their case of deforestation is a core issue of the business. And Jason, that the reality has changed. We're kind of living in a new world, as this conference demonstrates. That things are changing very quickly, and technology is a big part of it. So very interesting context. So we have some time for questions, and I wanted to open up with a burning question of mine for all the panelists. What do you see as the biggest factor of whether this concept of value-added commodities and traceability of what's in products is going to take off or not? What is a factor that you see as make or break to this really taking off? I guess I'll just start with Daniela, since it's been the longest time for her to talk. So Daniela, what's your opinion on what's going to make or break this in practice?
Yeah, thank you, Joe. And what we see is that there will be only a real transformation in the use of the soil and the social inclusion in the producing countries if there is a real and huge demand from consumers for this transformation. And Europe has not anymore so much power of bargaining to buy this kind of commodities, because they are big but still small marketing compared to what's happening in Asia, for instance, in India and other countries. So we see that it's important that we can generate a system transition where what's produced in a responsible way is possible to be traced, but it's also possible to be sold in more less developed countries, because only with this movement that we generate a lot of demand from the markets, we will be able to keep the production side standing on the practices. Otherwise, the case, it will, in our vision as IDH, the theory of change is that we need also to guarantee that investors are checking whether the global commodities are going in the coming years, so we can understand where should this transition happen.
Interesting. So consumers and investors are kind of a big player. Lionel, what's your view on that? And what are you seeing as far as consumer demand? Are you feeling this consumer demand at Marfrig? Is it just in Europe? Is that changing? What do you think is the biggest factor to make or break this?
We understand that is so one big factor, but it's important that we are in a place that is not the sustainability and the criteria in terms of sustainability in the production chain. They are very present. It is for the consumer in different parts of the world, and because we understand that there's no main factor, but however, is not we are not in the market that will not take off. They take off. the main question here maybe is how we will conduct this for the future, how we propose more transparency, how we can get more information for the consumer, and how they can choose what is the best product for their lifestyle that they are in different parts of the world. And another point here for the Brazilian perspective, at least, is that most of the producer, most of the cattle producer that we have contact, they are producing in a sustainable way. Daniela, we have some programs in partnership with IDH, and it's very clear for us that the biggest number of producers, the biggest number of cattle ranchers are doing the right things in terms of sustainability. And the numbers that we have today, based on the monitoring system, based on all of the information that we have together with these partners, are that the number of no sustainable systems are decreasing a lot. So this conscious is not only with the consumer, but they are very present in terms of the production. So again, we think that this product in terms of sustainability is starting to be part of our routine day. And now forward, we will have more information about this, but is a pathway that we will not back. We will only increase this, and we can show all the potential that Brazil and the cattle producer Brazilian has to demonstrate this for any part of any kind of consumer in different parts in the world, and even in the internal market in Brazil too.
So Leonel, what I'm hearing is that the genie's already out of the bottle and you can't get him back in. Jason, what's your view on that? Would you agree that this has already taken off? It's just a question of whether you've come into contact with it. What's your view about what is going to be the biggest factors for this going forward?
Yeah, I mean, I think it has already taken off. And in fact, I think it'll continue insofar as certain industries are ahead of others on that pathway. And if you ask your average consumer, if you know, for example, one of the food commodities that they buy, if it's traceable, they're going to probably say yes. And that's the scary thing, is that they probably don't even realize just how little of it is. And so as more become traceable by default, because they have to for regulatory reasons and others, it's not like consumers are going to be satisfied with just those being traceable. It will be across everything that they buy. And so, you know, we see it as very much a, you know, the trend is heading that way to be pretty much a kind of a de facto standard. To me, the biggest factor in value-added commodities or value-added anything really is the ability to differentiate one from another. And we see traceability as foundational to this. If you don't have traceability, then what in effect you have is you're commoditizing your commodities as opposed to value adding. We look at traceability as the track the train can run on. And so you sort of have to have that first in order to add those value added data points that can make a difference. I'll give one example. We're working with a Alaskan salmon supplier around some of their sensor inputs. They're using a technology called bioelectrical impedance, which measures the freshness of the meat and how long it's been out of the water. It's actually something that Samsung just added to their Galaxy 4 wristwatches, but it's been around for a bit in foods. And so if you don't have traceability, though, it's meaningless. Because if you're just doing that at the first part of the supply chain, and then it enters the commodity market, and then it just gets scattered around, and you have no idea where it came from, and you can't connect those measurements to retail, you've got really nothing there. But once you do have traceability, and then you do add those value-added inputs, now all of a sudden you can differentiate one salmon or one provider's salmon from another, and that's how you're going to have that. And this will go across not just one type of sensor, but time temp sensors to be able to show that it never exceeded a certain temperature within the supply chain, any number of things, and that's just food. We could get into so many different supply chains where you have to have traceability, and once you do, then you can really go beyond in value-added commodities.
Interesting. So as Leonel was saying, a great majority of their suppliers are using these sustainable practices, they need traceability in order to show that to a final consumer or somebody who's far away from that producer base, in order to for the consumer to really value those attributes. No? Another question what do you think is the biggest opportunity in value-added commodities and traceability? Are there any specific examples that you see, or anything that you imagine that is going to be possible in the next 5 years, say? And I'll let any panelist that wants to take that first.
I'll jump in real quick. Opportunities in the near term, transparency is an opportunity, because it's an opportunity to differentiate yourselves in terms of we have traceability and here's what we can show. That won't be for long, because it won't be a novelty, it'll be an expectation. And so, in the longer term, it's operational excellence. It's reducing your waste. It's increasing your quality by being able to connect those dots from end-to-end traceability, from production all the way to processing and onward in the supply chain. That'll be the real game changer for businesses, is whenever it actually saves money to do so, whenever it increases profitability and increases quality.
And Jason, how far away do you think we are from that being de facto or common practice, where most products are showing that? Just curious. This is an Elon Musk question.
No, well, it's just like, what's the saying? The future is already here. It's just not evenly distributed. It's happening. I mean, the salmon example I gave you, they're looking at significant decrease to carbon footprint because of being able to show how quickly that they can drive it down to -40 freezing, and then being able to use these sensor inputs. These things are happening in industries all around. It's just not necessarily in every industry across the board. And certainly within industries, there are those leaders that are kind of taking the point role. So,
Leonel, you were going to comment. What do you think is the biggest opportunity?
Yeah, I agree with Jason that one of the opportunities, the transparency in terms of all of this chain and all of this context. But I would add that together with the opportunity, we had a big challenge together. And the challenge that we have, if we bring this example for the Brazilian situation, is that we had a huge supply chain, a huge number of cattle producers with different technologies and knowledge in terms of production. So maybe for these next years, the point is how we can connect these opportunities to give more transparency in terms of all of the procedures, and how we can connect all of this information in terms of sustainability, in terms of no deforestation, in terms of production ways that is happening in the farms, in a model or in a system that can show this for the consumer, or show this for any customer or retailer, or whether for who is searching for this. As Jason said, maybe the point is when you have all of this transparency, you give the possibility for the consumer to choose what is the one that I understand that is better for me as a consumer. But again, the most challenge here is how we can give this possibility for the producers to share this information that is happening on the country in a way that it be possible to be shared with the consumer in the cities or in the supermarkets or whatever they are, but with full information about all the supply chain and about the commitments that not only the companies but the producer are together.
Daniela, what are your predictions for the next 5 years?
Yeah.
I think
it's very rich, because that's exactly what we are developing now for 5 years. in the whole beef supply chain is exactly the sustainability and traceability system that is possible for the final consumer to know where is this origin of the calf. So we did that for the first time now in July, and the meat was in the Carrefour shelves and being sold with a QR code that indicated all the origin of the animals from birth to the shelf. And of course, this is a incubation project that will be our strategy for the coming 5 years in Brazil. And what is important, I think, adding one, let's say, challenge for Jason in the list he has done previously is data protection, because we know in several countries there are different systems regarding individual data protection. In Brazil, it's a subject that's increasing a lot, and we know the challenge also is how to use individual data to provide big data. It's not so easy in some ways. Technically, yes, but possibly we will need to have also political arrangements and negotiation with the ones that are the individual providers of the data. And for less, I would like to say that we are living in a world where there is a lot of people that can't buy beef products, for instance, the intention is that, of course, you wanted those people to be able to buy, to eat at least once a week beef or animal protein. And so we have several levels, as Leonel said, several levels of different kind of consumers, the ones that really want something very special, and the others that just want a meat to eat and to give to their children. And on the other hand, we have on the production side, the producers that are on the board of the Amazon biome. Now they are smallholders. Most of them are smallholders with no access to technology, to service providers, no input providers, no credits. And so their business as usual is keeping cleaning forests so they can have pasture land for 2-3 years and then cleaning more forests. And so what we did was really that we built a model of technical assistance that is providing for those farmers a solution on all the levels, the technical assistance and the credit, and also has a final buyer that is Carrefour at this moment. And what is important is that we start to consider inclusion, because inclusion is like a fashion also trends around the world. Every company is saying and having their positioning about inclusion, diversity, and etc. But we don't think about inclusion of the smallholders and the final consumers. And what we are testing now is exactly how can we be inclusive in the whole supply chain of a given commodity. And that's also possible because of the landscape approach. So we are talking about being inclusive regarding all the women that are producing beef also, or meat in the landscape, or other kind of people, and all the people that's buying these products in the end, they should also be included. So I think besides technology and commercial negotiations on price, the other trend is that we should use more the concept of inclusion, and not keep it only for ESG proposals, but also for really include the ones that are a part of the society.
Yeah, that's the last question I'd like to throw out to Leonel and Jason as well. Is what is the potential impact for this with small producers? Be it negative or positive? Is this something that only large brands can participate in, et cetera? I'd like to hear your reactions to that. What will the impact be with smaller producers?
We see massive potential for smaller producers, for certain, for inclusion. One of the things that we've been tracking with is, in order to validate fair wages with regard to the products that consumers buy, you need to have three things: product, payment, and person or identity. You need to be tracking each of those. So, where's the product coming from down to a lot level? What were the payments that occurred, so you can verify that actually fair wages took place, and then did fair wages go to the right individuals? Who is the person in that supply chain? Those additional, those are happening slowly, and it's moving down, and that means greater inclusion, greater access to credit, greater opportunities for those at the start of the supply chain. So we see a lot of opportunity there. I will just reinforce what Daniela said about data protection and how critical it is. I think an example of that, even, we just hired somebody from the banking industry. I think, why would a traceability company hire someone from the banking industry? That is the reason, right? Because data protection and guarding individual data, and then being aware of some of the issues around data in this, it's very much it's an emerging field. Because what differentiates a business from an individual at a farm level is it's a bit challenging sometimes. So a lot of opportunity areas, but some challenges to overcome for sure.
Leonel, you're the winner of the last comment before we have to close out. Any last thoughts on this or
Okay.
other item?
Thank you. I'm very excited to listen about what Jason and Daniela said before. It's because it's really part of the work that we are doing today at the company here. As we have mentioned before, the Marfrig Verde Mais program is exactly based on these pillars: is to give support for the producers and to give some access to credit and mechanism to finance them. And today, our reality here is that more than half of our suppliers are small producers. So we have a way. Again, it's an opportunity to give them the possibility to share what they are doing well in their farms. So, but it's important to share with them what is the most important information that we need today, and preserving all of their individual information, as Jason comments again about the Daniela says.
Super. Well, I'd like to thank all the participants and panelists for a great session. Thank IDB Invest. Because this topic is so cool, we're going to host a webinar on October 28th to have a longer discussion, talk about some practical cases, et cetera. So you can see links for that probably in the YouTube channel, or you can go to Revere Consulting's LinkedIn site, and there's a place to register there. Thanks again to everyone. For the last session on this channel, please stay tuned to discuss the role of circularity in agriculture and hear from Grupo Éxito, Finavi, the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, and Arco Consultores. Thanks again, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
You're welcome.
Bye. Welcome.
Bye-bye. See you.
Que estamos conectados. Muchas gracias a los participantes de nuestro último panel, en el que pudimos ver esa necesidad que tenemos hoy en día de sistemas de trazabilidad, de alternativas de conectividad para generar valor y para generar sostenibilidad en nuestras cadenas de valor. Continuamos entonces esta conversación dándole la bienvenida a todas las personas y a nuestros panelistas a este nuevo espacio. en el que tenemos como objetivo conocer un poco cuál es esa relación de la economía circular en la sostenibilidad de nuestras cadenas de suministro. Y en este panel vamos a ver esa relación bajo tres perspectivas diferentes pero complementarias. La primera perspectiva es la de la investigación y la de la generación de conocimiento alrededor de esta temática. La segunda perspectiva es la que nos trae desde lo que es el retail y esa posibilidad de promover precisamente en la producción agrícola o agroindustrial estas prácticas. Y finalmente, conoceremos la perspectiva ya desde lo que es la producción agrícola. Entonces,
Agricultural. So we will start welcoming Luisa Santiago. Luisa is leader of Latin America for Ellen MacArthur Foundation. That is an international institution that fosters the adoption of these actions in the circular economy. And she will give us her take on research and knowledge generation on circular economies. So Luisa, can you tell us what your experience has been with circular economy in agricultural production or agro-industrial production, and where are we creating more knowledge regarding this field? Good morning, good afternoon. It is a pleasure to be here with you. Well, all my work is to accelerate everything we do so that we have a circular economy. This is our mission and our foundation. And in the Caribbean and Latin America, we work with one sole mission on a global sphere. So we work with companies, governments, the academia, the great designers of the region for this new economy that we would like to achieve. And the target of our foundation is to create a non-stop movement towards circular economy. For this, we create knowledge, we carry out research, but we also create tools and we work with key players of the specific systems like the food system, because we believe that it is necessary to have a common vision toward transition as systemic change. This is the role of circular economy, especially here because we're going to talk about food, but we also work with plastic, fashion, etc. And basically, the idea of circular economy, it's very important to establish the principles of a circular economy. And we're not talking about incremental changes, but a systemic change that is driven from its creation. There are three principles here. One, we have to eliminate the residues and the production of residues. This comes from the starting point to maintain and circulate the productions and materials in the economy. And three, there is an important point that is to regenerate nature that people forget. With this, we see our economy. We're not talking about thinking about what to do with a problem, but what to do from the get-go. So when we see agriculture, what we see in agriculture is that it is generally linear. It is extractive. There is a lot of waste. There is a lot of pollution. It's bad for people. It's bad for nature. If we analyze nature per se, it is regenerative. And we want to see food production under the lens of circular economy. We want to redesign this system so it's regenerative. So we work in favor, not against it. Our food can be a powerful power to help nature to prosper. This could be very important for climate and biodiversity when we bear in mind our current crisis. But what we analyze is greater drive to change the production methods in the field. The way we produce foods, for example, this is key, but what we have to do, and this is a result of research, and this is a study that will be published next week, is how to carry out a systemic change for the entire food system. And for this, we are sure that we have to go upstream, for instance. So we have to create a demand in the system and the proper conditions so that growers manage their lands. And here we can benefit a regenerative transition. In the study that will be published next week, we say, or we show, that the starting point is in the manufacturers of food products and in retail of foods. So these are the main buyers of food in the world. They have a massive agricultural footprint, and they can influence complete chains in agriculture based when you make decisions from the starting point, because we know about designs for telephones, for garment, for furniture, but most of our food is designed. These are foods for restaurant or deliveries that we receive at home. And the initial findings of these studies show us that we have to go beyond the incremental improvements when we see the production and the decision of what ingredients we will use in food. This is not only about incremental improvement in the ingredients, but we have to redesign fundamentally our foods. And these companies can apply the three principles of circular economy to eliminate residues, circulate products, and regenerate nature. They can transfer that to the design of the products, and with this find ingredients for their products that are more diverse ingredients that can face the crisis of biodiversity. We have more resiliency in our productions. This ingredient, we may have regenerative ingredients, and they can face our climate crisis. And we can also look for recirculated ingredients, oxiding, that is regarding the loss of food. There is a crisis of food loss. And in addition, ingredients of lower impact, because currently we depend very few species in our food. And with the value of biodiversity, we can transport this to what we eat. So I am absolutely sure that this will be a great contribution. And next week, we will publish our research, and I urge you to read it. Thank you, Luisa. We are paying attention to this study, especially when you talk about the get-go, or the starting point, which is the retail sector and the growers. And with this is headway for Carlos Duque is from the National Federation of Poultry in Colombia. Carlos Duque constantly is dealing with these poultry producers. Carlos, I would like to know which has been your role in the relationship in terms of circular economy, the need of a transition. Do you see this in the poultry production? Thank you very much. Hello to everybody, and to my panel colleagues. Of course, my role coincides with this federation. What I would like to mention something to show you how these subjects have evolved throughout times. When I faced the residue issues was at the end of the 80s, when I was carrying out my PhD, and I started working with we had an anaerobic generator, and this is 40% of the energy of this farm, and they didn't use energy as it should be used. And they proposed me to work to better use these effluents with microalgae. And this was the target. But throughout the research and at the end of the research, what we did was to produce biomass. And not only was cleaner, but it turned into an interesting product for other productive sectors, like for feeding swine, fish, poultry, for the pharma industry, for cosmetics. And what we did here was to establish a closed cycle. For the first time at the end of the 80s, we were talking about closed cycles. We didn't think about uniting the value chains. When I start working with the Federation of Poultry Producers in Colombia, I said, what are we going to do with the residues that we produce? So if you don't resolve these problems, the industry doesn't grow. And if it doesn't grow, we will not guarantee the food safety of a big population. So my target here was how to resolve a problem. With my experience, the group started focusing on giving value to these residues as a strategy to resolve environmental problems. But we evolved little by little. So we started working with clean product, and it wasn't only to manage the residue. The key is to lower the production of residue and be more efficient. And now we're working with circular economy. What do the organizations do? And I'm talking on behalf of this federation, but most of the federation in my country are doing this. Number one, you need a strong team with technically savvy to support the small farmers and give them consultancy and advice. And the first requirement emerges. These are managerial decisions. So the managerial mind, because if the leader is convinced, they will carry out investments so that things happen. Therefore, it is important when chairmen are convinced about sustainability in order to provide all the technical and financial resources in the hands of our poultry growers. There is a group that works in 4 strategic lines.
Y por tanto necesitamos armonizar a todos esos actores.
We're competing among more players. We need to align ourselves amongst ourselves with cattle raising in the field and the role we play. We have to provide legal safety to the production system. It's increasingly important because there are more and more players in the field, out in the field. So we also have a research line. We work very closely with the academy and to add value to all of the residue, all of the waste that is produced in the supply chain, in the production chain. So waste is no longer waste, it becomes raw material. And well, that is one line. There's another line for social, sustainable, environmental management. We want to train producers because we believe that they will have ever more sustainable production units. And this has to become systematic, as Laura said, and we are going to train them in different areas to address any possible issues and legal issues and impact management. And finally, there is a third line that is the key one, in my opinion. Circular economy can, well, not be addressed in an isolated manner. We need to work together with all the stakeholders. So we have an interinstitutional strengthening line. We work with government authorities and we support circular economy. We subscribe to the biomass reuse protocol, and we support the government authorities. We tend to complain there are no policies addressing these issues, but we are not actually engaged in building such policies, and we can play a key role in building those policies together with the authorities, because we know the production systems and how they work. And we have to work in a partnership in building an agenda. So we do work with government authorities and other productive sectors. We have the SAC, the Colombian Production Society. We have different groups. They also have environmental departments, and we are aligned and working together to drive the circular economy and to become more sustainable in our region. And this could, of course, build more results, boost our results. We work as a team with the producers, with the academy and government. So this is the role we play as producers and cattle growers, because sustainability has to be strengthened through institutional strengthening. And this applies to producers, to these groups. Thank you, Carlos. And it's interesting to consider how these groups become a tool, an instrument that can drive precisely this articulation, this integration. And since we're talking about integration and thinking about a full system, an overarching system, I would like to give the floor to Paulo now, who is part of this process. He interacts with these stakeholders. Paulo, you play a role on the retail side, right? So what would you say about the role you play, the responsibility you have? Retail can become key players that will bring about action, transformation in their value chains, in their supply chains. Thank you very much for this opportunity, for inviting me. I'd like to thank the IDB Invest, particularly for this opportunity and for inviting me. I'm very happy to be here with Luisa and with all the panelists that are joining the session. Well, Grupo Éxito is the leading retail chain in Colombia, and it also plays an important role in Latin America. We have a sustainability strategy, and we look at the needs to articulate circular economy, to engage with circular economy at different levels. Going back to Pablo's question, yes, we need to connect different points. We have to talk about food production, and also I always look at the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, packaging. We also need to look at packaging and products. What happens with shelf life, with durability, and this is where we play a role here with the technical projects we have, seeking to have a systemic approach. So one of our success cases is integration. We have over 7,000 providers and over 8 million customers. We want for our operation to become integrated and harmonized, especially when it comes to when we talk about circular economy and the food industry. So you need to have planning when it comes to procurement, and you need to align that. If you talk about waste, food waste, for protein and vegetables and fruit, we have to take into account the production capacity at a country level. A country like Colombia, well, does not always produce this data. It's not always, does not have a flat production level, and we need to keep track of that and to be able to get organized to export those products in a planned fashion. So we have planning when it comes to commodities, to production, to commodities, and we also look at the exposure or display of products, how they're going to be displayed at the stores, and the turnover. We also have internal reuse strategies, and we apply those strategies to, shelf products. And we also have a clear plan looking at, well, the things we want and don't want. We don't want for these, for the food waste to go to landfills. We also work together with food banks in Colombia. We've been working together for many years now. The Food Bank Association, ABACO, we are the #1 food donor in Colombia to over 500 stakeholders, and we also apply technology. We work with a startup, EatCloud. We want actually to, of course, work faster, to have faster reaction capability from food banks to bring down waste levels. And of course, especially at this point in time, the most vulnerable populations also need to have access to food. So this is the role we play at many levels. We worked with also other suppliers, other producers, growers, and we actually partner with them. And it's important to mention when we analyze food waste, the process, well, you have the end users as a source and the food production system as another source. We set up a school called ReAgro together with the food banks. The first school was set up in Antioquia state. We actually look to reuse the ag waste. This food bank, therefore, operates in the communities, in the grower communities where the producers are with the crops to manage the waste. And then initially we, set up the school called ReAgro to replicate the best practices that were created in this pilot project. Nationwide, we are the #1 donors of food in our country, but with ReAgro. ReAgro donates much more than what our group can donate. So yes, we have been able to drive our actions in such a way. We also assess sensitivity when you have products in touch with packaging and bottles. So we want to improve, to enhance our production systems, the packaging systems. You have, therefore, the circular economy also coming into play at this level and bringing down food waste. There are many takeaways. We're working with cleaner production technologies, also in line with the Food Waste Coalition initiatives from the Consumer Goods Forum to replicate best practices at a global level, such as, for instance, practices from the UK can be applied in Colombia, and we can have a peer-to-peer approach. A retailer can teach us that there's much that we can learn from other peers, and also to measure waste. Well, we are aware of things today that were not measured in the past. Once you measure, you build awareness and you manage your food waste. We are also looking at the following. We have one retailer, 20 suppliers, and 2030 targets in this coalition. So we're looking at producers that are going to also manage the waste production, to bring it down, and to become more sustainable. We have a foundation, Éxito Foundation, and we have acted as the ambassadors for the WTO. Thank you, Pablo. Thank you very much for sharing all of these initiatives with us. This is, there are many possibilities for a company such as yours to play this leading role and to also actually have restrictive measures to players that are not complying. You are taking on this responsibility, and building the supply chain and generating value to the processes. So I would like to ask you a question now in regards to, well, the vision, the mission you each have in regards to circular economy. And when it comes to development, sustainable development in our region, Latin America, in your opinion, what is the role circular economy will begin to play in actually driving sustainable development? And we're talking about articulation and partnerships. So how are you going to align your actions to those of the other panelists, so to speak? Luisa, would you like to begin? Yes, thank you. Thank you, Carlos, Pablo, and Pablo for all that you have shared. So interesting to learn how you're applying the circular economy principles in the food industry, food production system. Well, agriculture is a fundamental part of the Latin American economy. At our foundation, we look very closely at all of the things that are already being carried out, the initiatives that have been implemented in the region. They're interesting examples. Most have small scale still in order to bring about the change that we need and to address the food safety, biodiversity, and climate change challenges that we're faced with. We need to work very closely with other stakeholders and to give scale to these initiatives. We need to have scale and also a large number of initiatives, smaller scale initiatives. We have 14%, of course, of the fish producers of the world here in the region. So this gives us an idea of the impact we can have if we apply all that I said earlier. Circular economy principles to food design, we can really make a difference. And going back to what Pablo Montoya said, I'm quite sure you'll be interested in this study we carried out because it focuses on what you do. How can retail be a key player and, give more scale, enhance the scale, and to manage food waste? So if I am a retailer, I have my own brands, or if I'm a food producer, food manufacturer, I have my own brands. How can I play a role? And then end to end, looking at food production cycle to the retail cycle. This is something that empowers all of these players, all of these stakeholders who can actually bring about systemic change. And in our study, we also found positive results in other areas. Of course, you have the environmental crisis and food safety crisis, but you also have benefits for producers who will have access to a more diversified production system. Because when you look at the design that protects biodiversity and brings more options to the system, they can have regeneration processes and become more resilient with higher productivity. The soil will be more productive because if they reach a stability level after the transition towards regeneration, they can actually boost their productivity, and producers themselves can have less exposure to risks with appropriate production systems, and they can also have long-term contracts, which is also very beneficial for them. And for food producers will also have better offers. They will offer products that are healthier to people, to users. They will have more productivity. Their products will be more resilient, and there are many benefits. They will provide healthier, more nutritious products to the end users, and that will really be a game changer. There are also economic advantages once they actually provide these kinds of products to end users. we actually have an amazing biodiversity in the region, over 40% of the biodiversity in the world. And we are producing products that are not even native, not even indigenous. So there are great opportunities, huge opportunities for growers, producers, and for many stakeholders. Let us therefore rethink, reconsider all that we can do, how we can innovate. We can set up new businesses and provide different types of products to end users and to the supply chain in the region, and we can drive and make the most also of the ingredients that are available to us in our biodiversity. Thank you. Thank you, Luisa and Carlos. Carlos, what role will the circular economy play in the development of Latin America? Carlos, your mic is closed. Oh, there you go. Yes, I fully agree with Lisa. All that Luisa has said, well, yes, it's fully in line with what we think and do. We need to really think as a region, and we have so many natural resources. Our biodiversity is amazing. Our ecosystem provides us with so much, with our native, indigenous species, and we need to do more as a region. And the circular economy, in this sense, is a catalyzer, so to speak, of a new market niche. And maybe if we should consider that we should exchange more, exchange experience. We have to share more with each other and learn from one another. So once you learn from a partner that has positive experiences with positive impacts, you can do more. That's really key. We're not, well, our countries cannot afford to duplicate efforts. You know, to start from scratch, if you can learn from someone who has already started something you are attempting to do, you cannot work alone. It's not a standalone approach. The circular economy is about cooperation. We have different industries here in this panel, and that's really key. So let us work together to move forward with research, with investigation, what you do in your foundation. And in Colombia, we have identified a barrier, well, which consists of the following. You actually conduct research, and producers do not look at the results you're producing, so we're not integrated, and therefore we're lagging behind. There's a delay there. We're not making headway together as fast as we could. We need to have applied solutions. They need applied solutions. At the Producer Association, we have strong partnership with a research group in the Antioquia University for 25 years now, and that's really key. They know us. They know this industry very well.
Sometimes they propose a subject and they say, here, for instance, we have to see how we're going to use the eggshell to produce very interesting products. They feed us with ideas. This is constant feedback, which is very important. As Pablo said, we've been working with Pablo for some years because the customer is why we produce. And food safety is done this way. If I am not focused on my customer, I can get lost and I can put to waste the food safety. So the chain is important. Pablo, retail is our customer, but the product that Pablo receives will go to other customers, and these customers exert pressure on retail. And if we're not organized with Pablo, we're not doing anything. This is why we are working on a subject that will be very important. We are working with sustainable poultry, which will change the industry. And this is the pathway to guarantee food safety. And if we don't approach this properly, we won't do anything. I I have my local researchers right now, but if I create a partnership with a foundation, I will open the way to all Latin America, and this is a major opportunity to work with all of these subjects. Partnerships are key here in circular economy. Thank you, Carlos. And now, Pablo, I ask you the same thing. You are present in different countries of Latin America. What role will you have when you bear in mind the entire region and when you think about circular economy? Well, possibly this is one of the main pillars of any business because you can measure it from the economic impact, but today we have systemic visions that should be articulated. Now, to answer your question from the articulation point of view, and Carlos gave you some examples, for some years we have been working with the Colombian Poultry Federation to see how we have to be sustainable in this area. And from the retail, we are a crossway here. This is a crossroad, or you can adopt an imposed decision, adding, affecting the supply chain, or we can have an articulated answer that can be adaptable. When we created, for example, a stamp for swine, we also have stamp of sustainable cattle. The different actions that we have developed with the different federations. We work hand in hand also with the Ministry of Agriculture to guarantee a supply to our producers so we can inspire producers from the demand. So you harvest not to sell, but you sell to harvest. And we want productions to have a different reality. And this is where circular economy isn't only theoretical, but it can only be applied to business. And there is a shared value, and this enables conscious capitalism, which enables business. With the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, well, I think I met them in 2018 when we visited Portugal. Then we had an interesting meeting in Berlin, and what we have seen was inspiration from the academia. This was the first organization that really invested and showed us the impacts of circular economy. And through the Consumer Goods Forum, we have a coalition called the Plastic Waste Coalition, and we also adopted the outlines of the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, which allows us we don't create knowledge that exists. We apply this knowledge to the reality of the business where we are, so that a company like Grupo Éxito clearly has a strong DNA in the region. And in Colombia, we have a very important presence through the different brands we pursue to develop jointly. These processes are time consuming. You need change of mentality and leaders in the organizations that will allow us. Now, the retail industry already has many challenges per se without knowing the challenges of other industries. Well, you're going to create difficulties in the supply chain. We have to see where the global trends are going to, and we also have to be close to the organizers, to the growers, farmers. And in circular economy, what we mentioned first, we have to go from cradle to cradle, and sometimes circular economy is not only have a mindset of mitigating negative impacts. We have to see, how how we leverage this, how we harness this, how can the productive practice in any of the industries that supplies us becomes a positive player for the planet. And I'm going to talk about Colombia. Colombia has an important role in the world because of its biodiversity, and we have to see how we can contribute positively with mankind so that we don't open the agricultural borders and maintain our ecosystems. We have partners with different sectors, so we have joint development, understanding the needs of both sides. Well, Pablo, thank you very much. We have 4 minutes to bring this session to the end. I think that we could spend hours talking about everything that we could do. Here, there's lots of food for thought. The main reflection is the need to articulate ourselves with 3 different approaches. We have found many points where precisely we see opportunities of articulation. And here we have 3 different pathways. Here we're talking about customers, consumers, we're talking about territories, about authorities. And these crossroads are something that we're going to have to pursue. And we have to work with and not against nature, as Luisa said. And this is something extremely valuable. And this transition means to break many paradigms that we have in our mind. Circular economy goes beyond waste. We have to take on responsibility and the impact. It's not only an environmental theme. We were talking about the social and economic development that it can create in our region. And as Carlos mentioned, we have to see it from a strategic point of view. This is no longer a strategy, but yes, it is a business decision process for many companies. And this is also for the supply chain of the agricultural industry. Thank you very much, Carlos, Luisa, for providing all of their knowledge, Bid Invest for encouraging these moments of reflection, and everybody that followed us throughout these 45 minutes. I invite you to stay connected for the end of this event. Thank you very much and congratulations.
Good afternoon, everyone. Greetings from our headquarters in Washington, D.C. As we get to the end of our agenda, I would like to say a few words. There were 13 panels, more than 4,000 participants online from 50 different countries. And I personally believe that one of our institutions like ours, one of the best values that they can deliver to our region, to our shareholders, is exactly this convening power to bring important issues, important people, thought leaders, and stakeholders to discuss, to reflect on the future of these important things. And that was exactly what we did in this, we have done in this last couple of days. I want to start by thanking, of course, our more than 40 panelists that took their time to share their thoughts with us, to provide their vision for the future of agribusiness. And also our partners, IDB Lab, Rabobank for the support on organizing this event. And I cannot thank enough our team that has worked very, very hard to pull this event along. And I think that actually the last three tracks that you were discussing, I think that summarize in very general terms the big challenge that we have ahead: financial inclusion, public policy, how we can maximize circularity. But I think that the event was way much more than that, right? I had the opportunity to be in a few panels and a few conversations, and I saw discussions on the proverbial opportunities and challenges, but I could see that the mindset of the sector and the stakeholders are much more on the opportunities that the agribusiness has to embrace a path that it's not only financially viable, that's not the future for the sector, but also brings immense benefits to societies. I think that it's very clear to all of us that the agribusiness will be a key tool to resolve major challenges that we have ahead of us, that humanity has ahead of itself, like climate change, like food security. And in Latin America, in the Caribbean agribusiness sector in particular, it's very well positioned to take part on this change, to be this major actor of change. I also, as I was hearing the panels, and I could remember a few of discussions that I participated, similar discussions that I participated in the early 2010s, and it's amazing how they have changed. How the agribusiness sector have modernized brutally in this last 10 years, and how open to embrace new technologies, that it's open to maximize a system of expertise on the ground, bringing regional knowledge from outside to join forces with institutions like ours, but the private sector in other actors in the society, and to take benefit as well to the opportunities that the circular economy offer, and that this technology leap that we need in order to reduce our emissions and again provide food security offer to the sector. So I won't take much of your time. I gather that I'm the last thing between you and lunch at this point after a very hard working session in the morning. So thank you all, and I hope that we keep this discussion ongoing through engagement with our officers, as clients, as partners in the sector. Thank you very much. Take good care.